James sat by the dim light of a flickering lamp, his hands moving carefully over a piece of wood. Each stroke of the carving knife brought life to the shape that slowly turned into a tiny horse. It was late, the streets outside were quiet, and the only sound inside the small apartment was the soft breathing of his daughter Emily, who had fallen asleep on the couch with her schoolbooks still open beside her. James glanced at her, his heart aching. She was only 7, bright-eyed and full of dreams, yet he worried about how much longer he could keep providing for her. Since her mother had passed away years ago, James had taken on every role: father, mother, provider, and protector. By day, he worked odd jobs when he could find them. By night, he poured his soul into carving toys. Each figure was handmade. Wooden horses, dolls, small cars, crafted with care and love, not just for Emily, but for other children too. He believed toys carried more than entertainment, they carried comfort and imagination. But belief did not pay the bills. The rent was overdue, the refrigerator was nearly empty, and Emily's shoes had worn so thin that he worried they wouldn't last the coming winter. Still, James refused to surrender to despair. The next morning, he packed his toys into an old box and carried them to the market. The sky was gray, and the wind carried a chill that cut through his jacket. He set up his little stall on the corner, arranging the toys neatly, hoping someone would stop. Hours passed, and people only glanced before walking away. Some smiled kindly, but no one reached for their wallets. James called out politely to families passing by, offering a warm smile, but most barely acknowledged him. By afternoon, his feet ached from standing, and hunger gnawed at his stomach. Yet he stayed, because each sale, no matter how small, meant Emily could eat dinner that night. As the sky darkened, rain began to fall in thin streams. James pulled a worn plastic sheet over his toys to keep them dry, but he knew the day was lost. Just as he was gathering the toys back into the box, a figure appeared. A woman in a tailored coat, holding a sleek umbrella, stopped and looked at the wooden horse lying on the corner of the table. She picked it up gently, her eyes studying the fine detail of its carved mane. "This is beautiful," she said softly. James looked up, surprised that anyone had stopped. "Thank you," he replied, his voice rough with fatigue. "I make them by hand. Each one is unique." The woman's eyes lingered on the toy. "How much?" she asked. James hesitated. His toys often sold for far less than their worth, because he was desperate to sell something, anything. $10, he said quietly. She reached into her bag and handed him a crisp bill. But instead of leaving, she asked, "Do you make these alone?" "Yes," James said. "It's just me. I carve at night after work." He paused, unsure why he was telling her this. "I started making them for my daughter. She loves them. I thought maybe other children would too." The woman smiled, almost as if his words touched her. "They will. There's something special in them." She asked him a few more questions, about how long he had been making toys, where he learned the craft, and what inspired him. James answered honestly, though inside he wondered why a stranger would care. Finally, she bought not just the horse, but another small doll as well. She tucked them carefully into her bag and looked at him with an expression he couldn't quite understand, part curiosity, part admiration. "I'll see you again," she said before walking away into the rain. James stood still for a moment, watching her disappear into the crowd. He didn't know her name, and he didn't know why her words stayed in his mind long after she was gone. But something about the way she had looked at his toys, as if they were more than bits of carved wood, gave him a flicker of hope he hadn't felt in years. He gathered his box and headed home, unaware that this small encounter was about to change his life forever. The next morning James returned to the market, though his body ached from yesterday's long hours. He had barely earned enough to cover Emily's dinner and a loaf of bread. Still, when Emily smiled at him over breakfast and said, "Daddy, maybe today will be better," his heart swelled with determination. He kissed her forehead, packed his toys again, and promised he'd try his best. The air was crisp and the streets were busier than usual. James set up his small wooden display on the corner, arranging each toy with careful hands. He told himself not to think about the woman from yesterday, though her kind words kept replaying in his head. He assumed she was just another passerby who felt pity for a struggling man. Yet, as the hours passed, his heart skipped when he suddenly saw her again. She approached slowly, her coat elegant, her steps confident. James straightened himself nervously. He didn't expect to see her twice. She greeted him warmly, as if they were already acquaintances, and without hesitation began picking up one toy after another. A small train, a carved bird, a little soldier. Before James could stop her, she said, "I'll take them all." He blinked, certain he had misheard. "All of them?" he asked, almost in disbelief. "Yes," she said, her voice calm but firm. "Every single one." She handed him a large sum of cash, far more than he usually made in a week. James's hands trembled as he took it. He wanted to ask why, but he feared sounding ungrateful. Still, curiosity burned inside him. "You don't really need all these toys, do you?" he asked carefully. The woman smiled. "No, but children in shelters do. And besides, these toys are not just wood. They carry heart. That's rare." Her words disarmed him. She gave him a thoughtful look before adding, "Can we meet later today? There's something I'd like to discuss with you." "Coffee, perhaps." James hesitated. His instinct told him to be cautious. Why would a woman like her, a stranger, dressed in wealth, polished in every way, want to meet someone like him? But there was something genuine in her tone, something that didn't feel like charity. Against his doubts, he nodded. "All right, coffee." That evening, they met at a quiet cafe tucked on a side street. James arrived early, his shirt neatly pressed, though it was the only decent one he owned. When she entered, heads turned, but she ignored the attention and sat across from him with a gentle smile. "I never introduced myself properly," she began. "I'm Clara." "James," he replied. For a moment, silence stretched between them as he tried to guess her intentions. She didn't waste time. "James, I'll be honest with you. I'm not here just to buy toys. I see potential in you, in your craft. What you're creating has something most companies have lost: authenticity. Children today are flooded with plastic, soulless things. But your toys, they feel alive." James frowned slightly, unsure how to respond. "I just make them with love. That's all I know how to do. And that," Clara said softly, "is what the world is missing." She leaned forward, her eyes steady. "I want to invest in you. I run businesses, I build brands, and I help people with talent grow. You have something the market hasn't seen in a long time. With my resources, your toys could reach far beyond this street corner." James was stunned. He had expected kindness, maybe pity, but not this. He stared at her, uncertain if he could believe her words. "You're serious?" "Very," she replied. "This isn't charity, it's opportunity. I don't hand out favors. I build partnerships." James's mind raced. Partnership, funding. His whole life had been about scraping by one day at a time. The thought of expansion, of dreams larger than survival, felt too big, too far. Yet something in Clara's eyes told him she wasn't joking. She wasn't just some rich woman with a fleeting interest. She was offering him a future he never imagined possible. But fear tugged at his chest. Fear of losing control, of being swallowed by something he couldn't handle, of disappointing Emily if he failed. He nodded slowly, unable to give an answer yet, but deeply aware that his life was standing at the edge of change. James walked home from the cafe with his thoughts in turmoil. Clara's words kept echoing in his head, but so did his doubts. He had always lived with simple goals: put food on the table, pay rent, keep Emily safe. Dreams of success or recognition had long ago been buried under the weight of survival. The idea of building a workshop, of seeing his toys in stores, of working with a billionaire, it felt like a fantasy. A dangerous one. At dinner, Emily noticed his silence. She was eating slowly, trying to make her small portion last, and finally she asked, "Daddy, what's wrong?" James hesitated, but her curious eyes encouraged him. He explained, as best he could, about Clara's offer. Emily's face lit up instantly. "That's amazing. You could make toys for kids everywhere. You always tell me you want children to feel happy when they play. This is your chance." Her innocent enthusiasm pierced his heart. He wanted to believe it was that simple, but the fears inside him whispered louder. What if he failed? What if he trusted the wrong person? What if this was all a trap, a way to use him and discard him? James had been disappointed too many times to risk his daughter's future on promises. The following days, he avoided Clara's calls. He kept working at the market, selling here and there, but her presence lingered like a shadow. When she finally found him again, standing by his stall, she didn't look angry. She looked patient. "You're afraid," she said quietly. James didn't deny it. "I've built everything I have with my own hands. It's not much, but it's mine. If I let someone else take control, I might lose even that." Clara nodded. "I understand, but I'm not here to take control, James. I'm here to give you wings. You can stay on this corner forever, struggling to sell a few toys a day, or you can take a leap and see how far your talent can go. The choice is yours." Her words stayed with him long after she left. That night, Emily climbed into his lap with one of his carved dolls and whispered, "Mom would want you to be brave." Tears stung his eyes. He knew she was right. The next morning, James called Clara and agreed to meet. What followed was a whirlwind. Clara introduced him to designers, marketers, and investors. She didn't just throw money at him. She guided him, teaching him how to keep the heart of his craft intact while scaling it into something larger. James opened a small workshop, hiring a few local craftsmen who shared his passion. For the first time in years, he didn't feel alone in his struggle. At first, he was overwhelmed by the pace. Orders poured in faster than he could manage, and the sight of his toys displayed online and in small boutique stores felt surreal. But Clara stayed by his side, reminding him to trust the process. "Authenticity is your strength," she told him. "Don't ever lose that." Months passed, and James's life transformed. The apartment he once struggled to afford was replaced by a modest but cheerful home where Emily had her own decorated room filled with books and warm light. His workshop expanded, employing more people who needed work. The toys he carved at night were now in the hands of children across the country, and soon, across the world. One afternoon, as James walked Emily through a busy mall, she tugged his hand excitedly and pointed to a large store window. There, displayed beautifully under bright lights, was a collection of his handmade toys. A sign above them read, "Heartwood Toys, crafted with love." Emily's eyes shone with pride. "That's yours, Daddy. Everyone will know now." James swallowed hard, emotions tightening his throat. He had never cared about fame, but seeing his daughter beam with joy, knowing she would grow up with security and hope, that was the real reward. Clara joined them a moment later, smiling warmly at the display. "I told you the world needed this," she said softly. James looked at her, gratitude filling his heart. "You didn't just buy my toys. You gave me back my life." She shook her head gently. "No, James, you already had it in you. I only helped you see it." That evening, James sat with Emily in their cozy new home. She curled up beside him, holding one of the first toys he ever made for her, the little wooden horse that had started it all. James wrapped an arm around her and whispered, "We did it, sweetheart." Emily smiled, her eyes drifting closed. And for the first time in years, James felt peace, knowing that the love he carved into every toy had built not only a future for his daughter, but a legacy that would last for generations.